over here. Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you all for being here. It's always wonderful to be with so many friends and colleagues, people who have become a part of the network over the years. Before I begin, I'd like to acknowledge our many community partners and our sister neighborhood organizations within the Cisne Playa Collective. It's hard work working with other organizations. Can I also ask all of the SOMOS staff members, promotoras, youth, and neighborhood leaders to stand up, please? And let us acknowledge them, this incredible team of passionate change agents who work tirelessly every single day. Our team has grown threefold over the last few years. I also especially want to recognize two staff members, Brenda Andrade and Chelsea Pruitt. In the back. These two women have taken an immense amount of responsibility over the last few months to carry on the torch of our Fund Development Department through Jessica's transition. And in looking at this crowd and how beautiful this room is, I can think we can all say and agree that they have done a fantastic job, so thank you both. All right, so for the people who are visiting for the first time, welcome. And for the folks who have come year after year, I think you've heard my speeches get a little bit feistier, and today is no different, so here we go. Today I want to spend my time talking about liberation. But in order to do this in a productive way, I first want to set a few intentions. Please know that this is an invitation to listen, to open up your hearts and your heads to the notion that multiple perspectives and lived experiences and personal truths can and should exist. That traditionally, the definition of liberation is the act of being freed from oppression. But today, that we allow ourselves to be expansive in our thinking while anchoring ourselves in the fundamental belief that many of us want the same thing. We all want to live our lives with dignity, in safety, and to be surrounded by those we love. And we want to have purpose and freedom to advance the dreams for ourselves and for our children. At SOMOS, this is our definition of liberation, and what we are bringing to life through practice every day. I start with these intentions to recognize that the majority of us in this room are grappling with many issues and challenges that are rooted in inequities and institutionalized oppression. For the many Mayfair residents in this room, you know all too well what affordability and the housing crisis means from a very deep and real place. You know how it feels to live 16 to 20 people deep in a single family home, or how hard it is to find a quiet space for your children to do homework when you're living in your cars. Some of you also know how it feels to be displaced from Mayfair from San Jose and to try your luck in more affordable places, to only find limited access to resources, social services, and networks of support, like the supports that you've built here in this neighborhood. So you've returned, accepting the harsh realities and living conditions here because it's better than isolation. And you know how it feels to live in fear that you may be separated from your families, or that the murals and the symbols that you love and uphold may be erased, or how difficult it is to do back-breaking labor every single day with limited wages and very limited opportunity for mobility. And because I have a lot of colleagues and friends in here, I also know and acknowledge that the many people in this room, nonprofit staff, educators, board members, volunteers, philanthropists, public officials, small business owners, all of us, we are feeling, seeing, and wrestling with the mounting pressures of the inequities that are surrounding us, for ourselves, for our own families, and the people we are all intending to serve. Homelessness, attacks on our immigrant community, cuts to education, limited economic opportunity, the list can go on, and unfortunately, all of these things are pervasive here in Silicon Valley. And all of us are being impacted by these realities in very different ways. Thus, many of us are being called upon to evolve, to change how we address problems. Some of us are spending time in dialogue, researching, and reading everything we can get our hands on. and we are compelled to engage in deeper conversations about race, diversity, equity, and inclusion, to demand that more people of color representation be on our boards and our elected bodies, and to do more community engagement with the people that are most affected by these issues.
Amen.
This work, when it's done meaningfully and not to check off a box, is deep, painful, and hard, but it's necessary. And if you feel like me, some days this work is inspiring. It feels like we may just maybe at that tipping point where there's enough critical mass, allyship, and solidarity across ethnic lines and socioeconomic levels that's mounting. And that deeper partnerships between nonprofits and philanthropy will better align our work. And that with the committed and diverse staff within our own institutions, that systems change is possible. But at the same time, the days of sheer exhaustion are also compounding. And in the last few weeks alone, many of us who walk alongside the most oppressed communities have been reminded that no matter how much we try, that our voices just don't matter. And no matter how much we celebrate our diversity, understand the need for equity, and thirst for shared prosperity, that we, the collective we, are not ready for liberation. Because liberation requires us to shift dynamics. It requires us to name, acknowledge, address our own privilege and guilt, and to allow ourselves to build new and bigger tables, to demand that the whole pie get bigger, rather than succumb to scarcity. And the liberation that I'm talking about is not about flipping systems so that an oppressed group takes over and then has power over others. No, rather, I am talking about a new way of operating, that where power is shared, where the intentions of our democracy are upheld, and that economic prosperity isn't reliant upon the suffering of others. So how do we open ourselves up to this liberation? Now some of you may be thinking, oh my goodness, this is all too much. What are the solutions, and how do we find hope? Or you just may be uncomfortable with my word choice and tone today. And that's okay, I own that. This is my job as a community leader and an organizer, to push and to challenge and to offer a new vision of what's possible here in East San Jose and beyond. So here are some of the things that I can offer from our continued practice and learning and ever evolving in Mayfair. Number one, to stay hopeful and committed requires bold and long-term generational visioning. That while we engage in grant periods and strategic plans and election cycles, that our focus, time, and energy has to be on creating pipelines of leadership and sustained community change, like all the folks over here. We must affirm that the work we put in today is ever evolving and that it's a part of a long generational movement. That we stand on the organizing and the community building and the resistance that came before us, and that there will be more to come in the generations ahead. And at SOMOS, you will see this type of investment in human capacity and potential through the work we are doing with 1,300 families and their young children in the Alum Rock School District and beyond, the leadership development work that uplifts resiliency, voice, and skills of over 200 leaders, that the parent committees that are organizing have been influential in systemic change affecting 10,000 students. You'll see it in the neighbor-to-neighbor and youth organizing that has focused on a vision of Mayfair, not today, but from 20 years from now. A vision that includes them and their families and does not displace them. Our commitment to incubating and supporting spaces that are created for and by community, and done in ways that allow for access to economic opportunity and growth for the people, like the 26 immigrant women who are running their own cooperative now, Meta, or earning living wages right out of our leadership development pipeline. The second thing we've also learned is that to push through the complexity and the exhaustion, it requires us to connect to one another, to actually see one another, to be honest and authentic and vulnerable, to share our fears and our hopes and take the time to build trust in relationships, to come together in real collectives that are grounded in shared power, to allow each other to step up and step back when needed or when most strategic. And while this type of work is often fluid and organic and it's slow to start, I think the CCPL, they can. collective can say it is slow to start. This work allows us for the shared ownership and challenges and solutions. And when we do it, it's faster to implement, it's more transformative and impactful in the outcome. And SOMOS is truly proud and humbled to not only create or co-lead, but also engage in spaces like this. Parent and leadership workshops, Vecinos Activos, Jóvenes Activos, Empuje in their work with teachers, administrators, and a community for a better Alum Rock, the East San Jose Peace Partnership, the CEOs and the ALF Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Liberation Cohort, Alum Rock Birth Through Third Initiative, and the Countywide Universal Access Pilot, and again, Si Se Puede, and there's so much more. Our intentional leadership and participation in these spaces have been proven to be impactful on issues of housing, neighborhood development, education, violence and trauma, racial justice, and systems change. And we've also learned that to advance liberation and to allow people the space to dream, create, and live their own potential requires that we be supportive when needed, but that we also get out of the way. While we should have high expectations of all of our students and residents and community members, we must also take the time to nurture their interests, their gifts, their talents, their agency, trust in them and their own visions. We must also reduce the layers of bureaucracy and dismantle processes, policies, and structures that create and perpetuate inequities. And we also need to allow other people to lead, to push beyond the leadership vacuums and invest and support emerging leaders, because seriously, there is enough work to go around. I think my other CEOs and ED friends can attest to that. I've heard this staggering data point this last week that there are over 250 nonprofit executive director openings in the Bay Area right now. And we know that our boards and our commissions have openings, and that our local tech companies can also do more to increase their workforce diversity, especially amongst our Black and brown communities. So leadership and opportunity can no longer be designated to a limited few. At SOMOS, we strive to implement these values and practices and build upon them every day. Some days we get it horribly wrong, and sometimes we get it just right. We are oriented as organizers, connectors, facilitators, and bridge builders, all in service of investing in the people of this community, building their voice and leadership, and building their power. We do this with parents, neighbors, youth, and community leaders, just like Hipólito, Elizabeth, and Araceli. And we have demonstrated that when we do this, time over time, with trust and respect at the center, both formal and organic projects, networks, and movements emerge, become a ripple effect across the neighborhood. One that is not solely reliant on SOMOS as an organization, but rather the relationships and the networks that have been tended to along the way. So knowing this and building a shared vision of a vibrant Mayfair is what sustains us, our team, what pushes our team to stay engaged and to do everything we can to get everyone closer to liberation. So today, our vision is that we all show up, all of us in this room, that we show up and do the work to advance liberation, to commit in our work, decision-making spaces, and spheres of influence to inspire hope and righteous anger so that we can cut complacency and complicity. To move beyond ego, competition, and politics as usual and be accountable to one another. To take a stand to dismantle oppressive systems that keep families and communities in perpetual crisis, fear, and gridlock. And rather, build new tables and new visions where power is shared and emerging leadership is supported. To shift from charity to transformation and to remove barriers, eradicate waiting lists, and have an equity lens in everything that we do. Really, to just center all the work we do on people's needs and dignity. So that we, all of us, every single one of us in this room and the folks who are not yet at the table, can live our lives with dignity, in safety, and be surrounded by those we love, to be able to manifest our purpose and advance our dreams for ourselves and for our children. Thank you.